Alright, so we'll get right into it today and start making our interaction receiver component. So right click, create new C++ class, and we don't want actor component, we want scene component. And scene components are basically just an actor component that you can move around. And we're going to call this the interaction receiver comp CCS. And then when we're all set with that, we're going to create our class and make sure you put it in the interactions folder. And I'll skip ahead until that's done. So now that we've succeeded here, we're going to make our HSS version. So go into HSS game, public, and we need to make the interactions folder because that interface doesn't have an HSS version. So interaction receiver comp CCS, and we make it HSS. And make sure you put it in that interactions folder. And I'm going to create the class and skip ahead until it's done. Okay, so we find ourselves in Visual Studio in the interaction receiver comp CCS.h. And I'm going to paste in a whole bunch of code as usual. And as you can see from the description, our interaction receiver component is going to be responsible for receiving interactions, and it's going to override the functions from that interface that we made in the last class. And you'll notice that we have a comma and then the public eye interaction interface CCS right after our normal class declaration. And then we also have the include for the interface because you'll get an error if you don't have that. And we'll go down to our default Unreal functions public, and we just have our constructor and tick. In constructor, all we're doing is creating components, disabling tick, and setting our default values, so nothing too interesting there. And tick, all we're doing is calling our parents version, and it's going to be disabled anyways, so it doesn't matter. And now we'll get into our interaction interface functions that we're going to be overriding. And first we have our get is interactable. So quick reminder from last time, this is basically going to tell the caller, which is going to be the seeker component, if this interface is interactable with the given key. And then we have receive interaction, which will come after get is interactable when we've basically confirmed that we're open to interactions and we're ready to interact. And note that those two functions are both overrides, as are the rest of these as well. We then move down to our add interaction key and remove interaction key functions. So this is again just exactly what it sounds like. We're adding and removing keys that this component will be able to respond to. We then have our update box extent, which again is just going to be updating the size of our collision box. And then we get into begin play, and we're actually going to be doing something in begin play, so that's exciting. And what it's going to do is call our parents version, enable debug if the flag is on, and then force our box collision component to be attached to the physical location of our receiver component. So very important stuff going on in begin play, very abnormal for us so far. We then move down to our enable and disable debug mode functions, which are very obvious what they're doing. And then we have our box component declaration down there. And notice that we have it as blueprint read only. If you put too many components as blueprint read write, it'll actually slow down the editor when you pull up the blueprint. So we only want to make things read write that we actually are going to need to change in the blueprint. And we shouldn't need to make any blueprint changes to this, so we're just going to leave it as read only for now. And last but not least, we have our interaction settings. So first we have the B is interactable flag, and this is going to be on by default, but we can disable it if need be in blueprints. And then we have is debug mode enabled, and this will be false by default, but we can update it in blueprints, as you'll see later on. And then we have our interaction keys that we're storing for that receive and get is interactable function. So now we find ourselves in the .cpp, and again, pasting in a ton of code, and make sure you include the box component .h, and then we have our constructor where we disable tick, and then we create our box component, and actually get rid of that setup attachment line. I figure out that this was an issue later in the next episode, but for now, just get rid of it here and you won't have to do it next time. So we're creating the object, we're setting its location to 0, we're setting its visibility to false by default, and then we're setting the profile name to that interactable that we made in the last one. And then we're setting the debug line thickness so we can clearly see it, and we're making the color red. So again, copy all this down other than the setup attachment line. That is an error in this context. And next we have tick, and all we're doing is call our parents version as I make a little more space. Then get is interactable, we're just returning the variable. I forgot to check for the key here, so we're gonna fix that in the next one. And then receive interaction also doesn't check for the key. So again, copy down what I have now, but we seriously need to check for the key, and we'll update that in the next one. And then we have add interaction key, and we're using the in place call, which is the most efficient way to add things to an array. It basically just adds things right to the end, and that's what we want to do here. And then we have our remove function. So same thing, we're just processing the input. And then we have the update box extent, where we're just changing the box extent based on the input value and returning true. We then skip down here and we have begin play, where we start by calling our parents version. We then attach the box to our root component. And I found that setup attachment wasn't working, and this way of just actually attaching it like this actually worked. So that's why I made that change compared to usual. And then last but not least, we want to check if that flag is enabled. And if it is, we call our enable debug mode function. And speaking of that, when we enable debug mode, we want the receiver box to be visible, and we want hidden in game to be turned off. And then we do the exact opposite in the disable debug mode function. We're all set in the .cpp, so then we move into the hss.h, where all we're going to do is update the description. And again, no real differences between this and the CCS core. We're just putting this here in case we want to make updates in the future, which I don't anticipate for hide, seek, survive, but you never know. And then in the .cpp, all we have to do is get rid of that space and that omen pop-up that keeps bothering me. We then need to hop into our character, and first we're going to forward declare our receiver. So just like that. And after we forward declared that, we need to go in and actually declare it down here. So same kind of thing, we're making it blueprint read write, but not its subcomponents, as I talked about when we were making that in the actual receiver comp. But yeah, just standard stuff here. We want it to be right below the other components that we've declared. And now we're going to hop over to the .cpp, and first we need to put the include for the receiver comp. So interactions, receiver comp. And then all we're going to do after this is just create the component and initialize it. So we'll scroll down to the bottom of our constructor, and we'll paste in our initialization code. So as you can see, we're creating the component, attaching it to the capsule, and setting its location to be 000. And we're also updating the box extent to be the half height, so it'll cover the entire player. But you'll see that when we get into the debugging process. And then, as usual, in our HSS.cpp, we need to update the class of our receiver component to be the HSS version. So we'll update that there. We'll add the include. So interactions / receiver comp HSS, and our little squiggly will go away, and we're all set. And from here, we'll build, hide, seek, survive, and then open the engine when it's done. So I'll skip ahead until we're into the engine. Alright, so here we are in the editor, and we're going to go into our character and turn on debugging so we can see what's going on here in real time. So we'll go to viewport and try to find our receiver comp. And nope, that's not it. And there we are, interaction receiver comp. And we just want to tick is debug mode enabled. And then compile, save. Okay. So now we can close out of that. And as you can see, the receiver box is not editable. And we'll play. And as we're running around here, look at the little red box. And that is the visualization of our interaction receiver component on the character. So see how it covers its entire body? That's what we're looking for. And we'll be able to interact with it in the next video where we make the seeker component. So now we'll quickly speed run our review process, and I'll delete the old build and package it up again, and I'll skip ahead until it's done. Alright, packaging complete. Now we'll quickly start up the build. And because we're just playing in this standalone built project, all we can see is our own box. But rest assured, this proves to me that everything's working. And now we'll jump into Perforce for a quick look at my change set. So make sure yours is pretty similar to this, and then we'll send it on its way. And then we'll hop into Jira, throw it into review, and then to done. And we'll add our little comment. So with all that being said, thank you so much as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.